BBC Three Counties Radio.
A Hertfordshire woman who was given contaminated blood as a child says she hopes a report out later this month will mean she will finally get compensation. Nikki Jones from St Albans has haemophilia and contracted hepatitis C after receiving treatment after an operation. More from Carol Abercrombie.
Nikki says she was given factor VIII, a blood clotting agent from donated blood, which was contaminated when she had an operation to remove her tonsils in 1980. She was refused compensation in 2004 and is among a large group of people still campaigning. A report by Lord Penrose is due to be published later this month into cases in Scotland, which she hopes will eventually lead to payouts.
St Albans, all the people that have a go at me on Twitter for being childish, just makes me want to be more childish. And that's quite childish in itself.
Yeah.
A St Albans woman who was given, this is a very serious story actually, a St Albans woman who was given contaminated blood hopes a report out later this month will finally mean she gets compensation. Nikki Jones has haemophilia. When she was 8, she was given factor VIII, a blood clotting agent which she believes gave her hepatitis C. The use of manufactured factor VIII has been described by Lord Robert Winston as the worst disaster in NHS history. Catherine, you've got more on this. I'd never heard of this. Obviously, I've heard of haemophilia and hepatitis C. I'd never heard of this factor VIII. What is Robert Winston talking about when he says it's such a big disaster?
Well, it's a strange one, isn't it? Because I hadn't heard of it before, but thousands of people in the UK, many of them haemophiliacs, were infected when they were treated with these blood products, which were imported from the US in the 1970s and 80s. Now, there is a campaign group who's trying to raise awareness of this. And according to this group, blood products came from the US, where intravenous drug users, prostitutes and prison inmates were being paid to donate blood known to carry a high risk of infection.
Oh, guys, anyone see the flaw in that plan? Wow.
A recent parliamentary report by a group of MPs said around 7,500 people were infected by these products. More than 2,000 patients are thought to have died as a result. Now, opening a debate in the Commons recently, the Conservative MP for North East Bedfordshire, who you'll be speaking to later on, Alistair Burt, said the scale of the disaster is immense.
This is the 15th biggest peacetime disaster in British history, in which the Black Death at 3.5 million is the worst, but the awful Aberfan, whose name we all know, is but the 142nd, with 144 lives lost. Contaminated blood has killed 12 times more.
Nikki Jones is the name of the person we mentioned earlier on. She's got hepatitis C, she believes, because of this factor VIII. We're going to talk to her later on. But briefly, give us sort of the background to her story.
Well, she believes she was one of these people who was infected in the 70s and 80s when she was a child. Her family say that she went from being a happy, active child to one that was always tired, spent a lot of time in bed and had skin rashes and just generally in poor health. The medical profession put it down to her age and psychological problems.
When did she find out that she had hepatitis C?
Well, not until pretty recent, actually. It wasn't until 1995 that she discovered she'd been tested for hepatitis C in 1991. And was positive, but she hadn't even been told that she'd been tested for it.
Blimey.
Hepatitis C is a virus that can infect and damage your liver, and when Nikki was pregnant with her second child, she had a letter through to say that she was at high risk for CJD because she'd received blood from people who had the degenerative brain disease. She's given no warning or discussion, just a letter out of the blue.
I'm surprised that she's not been awarded millions in compensation already. She's been struggling, hasn't she?
She really has. There are various funds that have been set up to help victims, such as the Skipton Fund. Now, Nikki says she applied for that, but was turned down on the grounds that she'd naturally cleared the virus. But medical experts disagreed, and they believe there's a strong link between what later transpired. She got breast cancer. And the medical experts have suggested that the hepatitis C may have been the cause of it, or a cause of it.
Yeah.
A recent report by a group of MPs highlights how most people with hepatitis C receive no ongoing payments, and they feel as though they have to beg for discretionary payments. And it recommends that payments to people infected through contaminated blood are at a level which lifts them out of poverty.
I don't know what that means, that sentence. It recommends that payments to people infected through contaminated... OK, right, so they get a significant enough payment to make a difference.
Yeah.
Surely it seems obvious to me. If you've got hep C through, you know, your own lifestyle choice, well, then you should probably get treatment, but maybe not compensation. But if you've been given a medicine that comes from a flawed source and has given you the hep C, then... well, duh, of course you should get compensation, shouldn't you?
That's what the MPs are saying. A report by Lord Penrose is due to be published later this month, but that's into cases in Scotland. Now, Nikki Jones hopes that, you know, if it goes their way in Scotland, maybe it'll have a trickle-down effect to people here in England.
I'm not saying this is the case in this situation, but do you ever get the feeling that they drag out some of these health cases so that most of the people are dead, so that it's a less payout? Well, those people that... were affected by when we were testing nuclear bombs in the 50s on that island. And there were a load of people, have I got this right, were paid to stand on a ship a few miles out from this island to test the effects of standing a few miles out from an island while a nuclear bomb was dropped off. And hey, what a surprise, they all got cancer.
Well, also, you got the thalidomide case.
Yeah.
Still battling.
It's still battling. And that's, when was thalidomide? 40 years ago? 50 years ago? Something like that. And you just kind of get the feeling that the governments and these companies are battling and battling until there's only a handful of people left, and then they can go, oh yeah, no, we'll of course we'll pay out, when really loads of people have suffered all their lives.
I was just really shocked by the scale of this. I had no idea this had happened. Thousands and thousands of people in the UK.
Across beds, hearts and bugs.
This is BBC's Three Counties Radio.
It's 6:30, I'm Simon Oxley. A Hertfordshire woman who was given contaminated blood as a child says she hopes a report out later this month will mean she will finally get compensation. Nikki Jones from St Albans has haemophilia and contracted hepatitis C after receiving treatment after an operation. A Hertfordshire woman who was given contaminated blood as a child says she hopes a report out later this month will mean she will finally get compensation. Nikki Jones from St Albans has haemophilia and contracted hepatitis C after receiving treatment after an operation. More from Carol Abercrombie.
Nikki says she was given factor 8, a blood clotting agent from donated blood, which was contaminated when she had an operation to remove her tonsils in 1980. She was refused compensation in 2004 and is among a large group of people still campaigning. A report by Lord Penrose is due to be published later this month into cases in Scotland, which she hopes will eventually lead to payouts.
Now, a Hertfordshire haemophiliac is hoping a report out later this month will mean that she finally gets compensation for being given contaminated blood as a child. Nikki Jones is from St Albans and joins me now. Morning, Nikki.
Morning.
First of all, I'm going to ask a really silly question. I don't know a lot about haemophilia.
OK.
You've always had it from being a baby, have you? Or you don't develop it later in life, do you?
I think some can.
Oh,
some
really?
Can, but majority are born.
And so were you born
yeah.
with it?
I was born with it and wasn't diagnosed till 1977.
Blimey.
My dad's a haemophiliac. It is unusual for girls because it's predominantly a male bleeding disorder.
And it's where you don't stop bleeding, is it? If you were to cut yourself, is it as simple as that?
It's you bleed longer.
Right.
You don't bleed any sort of loads more. It just means that any wounds take longer to heal because we're lacking or missing the factor 8 that helps clot the blood.
That must be tough. Obviously your dad had experience with it, but it must have been tough as a kid. I've got 2 little boys, and they're always bleeding. They're always getting into scrapes and things. So as a kid, that must have been really hard work for you and your family.
Yes, it was. So any head injuries, joint problems, we would have to have treatment. It's usually worse in boys, which it is in my sons.
Right.
So nosebleeds, as you say, as they're growing up, they want to play football.
Yeah.
So
constantly scrapes and scratches.
Yeah.
So this, you think, happened when you were 8 years old, and you were having your tonsils removed, were you?
That's right, yeah. I was having a tonsillectomy in 1980, and prior to that, treatment I had was called cryocypricate.
What's that?
That's the clotting factor 8. And in 1980, they changed it to factor 8. Which was cheaper.
So factor 8 is, what do? Do they inject it, or do they put it in intravenous and it helps your blood thicken?
That's correct, yeah. It helps the blood clot.
Right.
So...
OK.
So, yeah.
And so you had this going into you while you were having your tonsils taken out, because obviously that's quite a bloody procedure.
Yes, yeah.
And this factor 8, it later transpired, a lot of it came from drug users, prostitutes, prisoners who'd been paid to give their blood. Is that right?
That's correct, yeah, from borstalls, prisons, both in the UK and America. I'm
laughing because that's obviously such a bad idea. That just seems nuts, doesn't it?
Exactly. I mean, it goes back a lot further.
Yeah.
Sort of, we're talking the late 50s.
Right.
But yeah, there was a shortage and we weren't self-sufficient in blood, so the government paid, because it was cheaper, prisons, borstalls, both in the US and in this country.
So you claimed that because of this factor 8, you got hepatitis C.
That's correct, yes.
From the age of 8.
Yes.
How did you notice an immediate effect, or did it? What effect did you notice? What changes did you notice after the tonsillectomy?
After the tonsillectomy, it was several months. I just changed from your average 7-8-year-old girl from horse riding, dancing lessons, out on my bicycle, to a child that just took to her bed. I lost interest in school, my friends. I had health conditions. I wasn't well. I had rashes. I was itching. Loads of other symptoms. And my mum used to take me back to the haemophilia centre and say, what have you done with my child? You know, she's not the same child. I remember the doctors running off into their little rooms. Of course they knew, but they just put it down to, it's psychological problems and things like that. So
you must have thought you were going nuts then. If the doctor's saying, it's all in your head and you're physically feeling it.
That's it, yeah.
That must have been very confusing.
Yeah, and of course parents, they know, don't they?
Yeah.
You know that there's a change in your child, and it took years to get answers. We were palmed off, and it wasn't until the 90s that I actually found out.
And tell me if I got this right. The doctors discovered you had Hep C in 91.
That's correct.
But they didn't tell you until 4 years later.
That's correct, and that was just by chance. Yeah.
This is like a Victorian cover-up.
Yes, yeah, it is a total cover-up. You're right. That is the best way to describe it, and it's been going on for decades.
Why did they not tell you they tested you for Hep C?
Oh, they didn't tell anyone they were testing them for Hep C. They knew that there was a problem with the factor that we were being given. They didn't know what the problem was, and it wasn't till the late 80s. Well, with HIV and AIDS, it was early 80s they knew, and then it wasn't till, they say, the 90s, early 90s, that they knew about Hep C. They knew there was a non-A, non-B, which later transpired to be hepatitis C.
Now, are you clear of Hep C? Is Hep C the one that can be cleared? Because there's one can be and one can't be, is that right?
Well, they say that people do naturally clear hepatitis C, but as the years have gone on, research has shown that actually you don't naturally clear hepatitis C. It lays dormant in your body and can mutate into other cancers or illnesses. So
the Hep C, the direct effects of that have gone. And was that a natural progress, or did you have beta interferon or anything like that?
No, I didn't have any treatment because I'd been forgotten about, which was the admission of the hospital as well. Yeah. And it turns out in 97 I'd naturally cleared the virus.
But it was still having impacts on your life, wasn't it?
Yes, yeah, and still does now.
You had breast cancer?
I was diagnosed with breast cancer in, when I was 39, 2010.
Yeah.
They do believe that was due to the Hep C.
And thousands of people have been affected by this factor 8.
That's right. There's over 4,000 haemophiliacs that have been given contaminated factor 8. Of those 4,000, approximately 2,000 have died. Some have been awarded 20 grand from the Skipton Fund, just pennies really. And some of these people, as I say, have died. Some are still terminally ill, and fighting for justice.
And you've had no compensation whatsoever?
No, I was turned down. I think
we should be parading you around on our shoulders and buying you a house. I really think that people like you that have been affected by something like this should be completely looked after, and not enough of money could apologise for what you've been through. There is a report, isn't there? The Penrose report is coming out dealing with factor 8, but this is just in Scotland, isn't it?
That's correct, yeah. Lord Penrose reports on the 25th of March.
Why is Scotland leading the way here?
I actually don't know. I don't know why. I think it was something that the Scottish people sort of fought for, and he's been reporting on this looking into it for about 6 years, if I'm right. So it's taken a long time. Whether it'll have an impact on what happens down here, I don't know. Obviously, he can make recommendations, but he can't say that you have to award people. We can only hope.
Listen, I'm not one for conspiracy theories. But I do think with things like this, where there have been massive medical mistakes, like thalidomide and things like this, that quite often they're waiting for everyone to die or waiting for a no, do you know what I mean? That they're waiting for everyone to get out of the way, and then they go, no, there's 10 people left. No, of course we'll pay compensation. It was terrible what happened all those years ago. I don't mean that disrespectfully.
No, it's really interesting you should say that, because not long ago a letter was released, and the McFarlane Trust and some other trusts, it was reported in there that basically the saying was, if you leave it a bit longer to the government, with a bit of luck, a few more of these people
save
would
a few
have passed
quid.
Away.
Less of a scandal.
And that's less money to pay out. So, these trusts, the McFarlane Trust, the Skipton Fund, they need to go. They're not fit for purpose, and appropriate compensation needs to be awarded.
Is your breast cancer all right now? Is that sorted? Or
I'm waiting for the 5-year-old clear this year, so fingers crossed.
My mum's just come through that, and we got a scan at the other day, and she was clear, so it's all good. I wish you the very best of luck with that.
Thank you.
Wish you the best of luck with the Hep C, and that it stays dormant. And you must be worried for your boys. You mentioned your boys have got haemophilia.
A boy and a girl.
Boy and a girl.
Yeah. Both have bleeding disorders, and have a mother of 2 young children with haemophilia. We want better care to come out of this for them, safer treatment, and...
We were all shocked by this story. Nikki, I wish you the very best of luck. Would you let us know, how things progress?
Yes,
and,
I will.
More power to your elbow. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
BBC Three Counties Radio.
She was amazing, wasn't she?
Wonderful.
She was, bless her, she was so nervous.
Was she? Didn't sound it.
No, I know, and I said afterwards, I said, you were fantastic. And she said, I was so nervous.
Well, hopefully she'll keep in touch with us.
You can pick up the vibe when someone comes in, and you could tell she was nervous. And I said to her, when Boring Jamie was banging on about pigeons, I wasn't really listening. I said, look, there's no trick questions. We'll just have a little chat. What an incredible story. Incredible. And it annoys me. People like that. Well, the government should be getting their, or drug companies or someone, should be getting their checkbooks out and saying, right, how much do you want?
And speaking as the average Joe and Josephine, isn't it a scandal that we didn't know about this before today?
She got that, when did she say she was 8? She's a couple of years younger than me. So she got that blood about 32 years ago. And she had Hep C, and her breast cancer is probably a result of that. 32 years ago, and she's still fighting to get a few quid. What? It just leaves me... Thank you, Kelly. It just leaves me... I don't understand it. I do not understand it.
It's 8 o'clock. I'm Simon Oxley. The headlines: Hertfordshire woman's hope for compensation, missing Luton dad contacts police, and fire service anger at Stevenage hoax call.
BBC Three Counties Radio.
A Hertfordshire woman who was given contaminated blood as a child says she hopes a report out later this month means she will finally get compensation. Nikki Jones from St Albans has haemophilia and contracted hepatitis C after receiving treatment after having her tonsils out in 1980. She's waiting on an initial report published by Lord Penrose in Scotland.
He's been reporting on this looking into it for about 6 years, if I'm right. So it's taken a long time. Whether it'll have an impact on what happens down here, I don't know. Obviously, he can make recommendations, but he can't say that you have to award people. We can only hope.
If you were listening an hour ago, you would have heard Nikki Jones come in. She's a woman from St Albans who was given contaminated blood. She got haemophilia. When she was 8, she was given Factor 8, a blood clotting agent, which she believes gave her Hep C. It later transpired this Factor 8... Where did they get this Factor 8 from? It's
America.
Incredible.
They were importing it from America, and it seemed they were using blood sold to them by the sorts of people that you would not want blood from.
Well, prostitutes and drug users, primarily, and
high-risk groups.
What a surprise. 4,000 people were infected because of it. None of these people have had compensation. Half of those people have since died. We can speak now to Conservative MP for North East Bedfordshire, Alistair Burt. Good morning, Alistair.
Good morning, Iain.
You've been leading calls for improved compensation for patients who were given contaminated blood. Why is it so important to you?
I have constituents who are affected by this. I've met a number of families who have been infected. And I think myself and quite a significant group of MPs now, and there's been MPs concerned about this for some time, now feel seriously worried that this has gone on for much too long. There have been attempts to do something about it. There have been payments made to people, but it's never been fully pulled together. And important questions, just as you've asked just now, about where the blood came from, who knew what and when, which is what the public now these days want to know about things like this. This has never been fully dealt with, and that's why MPs are still campaigning on this issue.
You said in the Commons recently, Alistair, that the scale of the disaster was immense. What did you mean by that?
What I meant by that is it's one of the largest peacetime losses of life that this country has ever experienced. And I think it is the third greatest loss of civilian life in well over 100 years. We all remember the awful tragedy of Aberfan, when 144 children lost their lives in a landslip in 1966. The tragedy of a contaminated blood has killed 12 times as many people as were lost at Aberfan, and yet it's a rather unknown issue and statistic. That is the scale of what has happened to people.
It seems incredible. We spoke to one woman earlier on, Nikki Jones, who got Hep C because of this factor 8. That happened in sort of 1981, 82. It just seems incredible that so much time has passed and she's not received anything at all.
Well, there are some diseases that do not manifest themselves until a long time afterwards, and Hep C is one of them. You can be infected with Hep C, and it can never have any impact upon you at all, or it can have an impact at some stage during your life. And I think the authorities do not genuinely know how many people were infected and who will show symptoms, and that's why some of these cases are revealed now. What we do know, however, is that some 1,200 people contracted a mixture of HIV and hepatitis. There were 1,200 of those, and of those, only 300 are still alive. And that's probably one of the biggest parts of this tragedy. The current situation is there has been an inquiry taking place in Scotland, the Penrose inquiry, which is due to report on March the 25th, a long-standing inquiry. That will have an impact on what happened in the rest of the United Kingdom, and we and many others are awaiting the results of that inquiry.
Oh, so that is solely for Scotland, isn't it? But you're saying that that would have an impact on England and Wales and Northern Ireland?
It will, because it must look at matters which occurred before the devolved administrations, because these incidents, the use of the blood happened before there was separate devolved administrations. So inevitably it must look at that, and I know that there will be implications therefore for the rest of the national health going back to those years.
Alistair, we may speak to you when that report comes out. I really appreciate your time this morning. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Conservative MP for North East Bedfordshire, Alistair Burt. It's one of those stories that just leaves me scratching my head. I'm dumbstruck. If you missed Nikki an hour ago, she was brilliant. I thoroughly recommend you go and listen to it on the iPlayer at your leisure.